Privet?
Okay, so I guess we do have time for one question. So, why don't you, that was a great question. Can you rephrase that?
In the text, it talks about how in Latvia, it was cost effective to build another facility to build railroad ties and equipment, but they refused to allow it to happen, even though it was production and cost efficient. Why?
That's a perfect example of distance decay. So, all right, let's go into distance decay a little bit. So again, how many people do we have in Russia today? Just an estimated guess.
150 million.
Around 150 million. Good. And how many time zones is Russia?
9.
9 time zones. So if you look at this, on the map here, we can see the borders aren't outlined very well, but you can see that this is the border with Europe, and then here we have the border running along southern Russia here, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. 9 time zones from here to here. So here is, Moscow is in the core. The core is the west of the Ural Mountains here. So this is Moscow, this is St. Petersburg, you've got the Volga River, this is all the core, and where most of Russia lives. Most of those 150 million. And out of those 150 million, what percentage is ethnic minority?
20%.
Around 20%. And there's a lot of minority groups in Russia. And so you can see that a place like Vladivostok or out here in the Far East is 9 time zones away from those here. Wow, that's really far. So the question was about when it was in Soviet times, of course, Latvia was an SSR, and different places were ordered to make different things. People couldn't just decide what they were going to make. And I think that the spirit of your question is, why would they be ordered? It made no sense, economic sense, for them to have to make that, because it could be made so much cheaper and better somewhere else. Well, when you have headquarters in Moscow, this is where the orders were coming from. And so it's very difficult from the perspective of headquarters for them to understand what is going on in these different locations. So distance decay, I love it because as a geographer, it just shows the importance of geography. So the farther away that you get from headquarters, the less invested people feel, and the less also the people that feel very, very far away. They have a whole different culture, a whole different life, because their geography and their cultural setting and their location makes their lives so very different from what is going on here. That not only can headquarters not accurately assess the conditions that are going on somewhere else, but they can't really relate with each other. So the connection weakens with distance. And we also went into the example of the United States, which is a good example too. Now the US is one country, but there are different locations in the US which are culturally very different, and a lot of this is due to geography. So it's well known that Californians march to the beat of their own drummer quite often, and they're very happy to admit that to anybody that will listen. Whereas it's often very conservative as you get closer to Washington. And a lot of activity surrounding Washington is to do with the government. People that live in the mountains. The Appalachian Mountains are not very far from Washington, and yet that geographic location makes it so different culturally and so different living there that quite often people living up in the mountains would feel very little in common with those in Washington. So that's a very excellent question, which pulls together a lot of the ideas surrounding the Soviet framework and why it really didn't work in a place that was that huge, that took in so many different groups of people and minorities and promised them so much autonomy and so much a piece of the pie, and then yet failed in respect to human rights, human choice, And really, that very equity that was promised wasn't delivered. So that was really the root of the failure. Thank you. Good question.